Let's review chapter 250 of Jujutsu Kaisen and talk a bit about Yuta Okkotsu. And this is one of the best chapters we have had in months. And I'm going to jump around this chapter a little bit because I feel like it, and something I really want to talk about here is Ryu. When we enter Yuta versus Sukuna, the big looming threat here is that Ryu got one-shot by this guy, and that was the point when the power of Sukuna was made abundantly clear and Gojo pretty much had to come back. But in the case of Ryu, he was really there to make the audience afraid of Sukuna and be a jobber. And now in chapter 250, we see that Sukuna is giving Ryu more props, and really this seems like Gege is just trying to make this whole scenario look a little less pathetic, and by proxy, make Yuta look a little better. So on the note of Yuta, let's talk about his domain expansion this chapter. This chapter expands on Yuta's domain a bit, and we get more explanations on how exactly the katanas work. Yuta gets to pick one copied curse technique to imbue into his barrier as he sure hit, and all the rest of the copied curse techniques are scattered among the domain as all of these katanas. And being able to choose which technique to use in your sure hit, that is really good. I think that alone puts this domain as a top 2. But having the rest of your copied curse techniques be random in your domain, that's not so great, and I think that's even pretty bad. Even though that is mostly alleviated by being able to choose your sure hit, because in this case, the sure hit that Yuta has chosen is almost guaranteed to be Jacob's Ladder. And Sukuna thinks the same thing because this chapter explains to us what their plan actually is and where Sukuna is at power-wise. Because the beginning of this chapter is just Yuji and Yuta trying to lay the hands on Sukuna. And honestly, they put some work in, and this goes a little bit better than you would expect, and Sukuna gives us the full internal dialogue on how weakened he is currently. With Sukuna reiterating that he is unable to use domain expansion, his RCT remains sluggish, and his total curse energy is about equal with Yuta's. And he is also unable to use his space-cutting dismantle while operating Hollow Wicker Basket. And on top of all of this, Yuji is breaking Sukuna's hold over Megumi's body by punching the barrier between their souls. And just like chapter 215, Sukuna's hold over Megumi's body is starting to break down and his curse energy output continues to drop. And Sukuna states that if he loses his hold enough over Megumi's body, he will be unable to maintain Hollow Wicker Basket. And once the Hollow Wicker Basket is gone, they will nuke him with Jacob's Ladder and destroy the cursed object within Megumi Fushiguro. This is really the worst situation we have seen Sukuna in since he fought Gojo, and 4 arms are proving to be invaluable. Most people wouldn't even be able to defend themselves properly while maintaining a Hollow Wicker Basket like this, and Sukuna is not only able to defend himself but partially fight back, which we see when Sukuna grabs Yuji and starts to activate a cleave, and Yuji is pretty much fucked here. That is until Yuta clutches in with the curse speech and tells Sukuna to stop moving before retaliating with a thin icebreaker. Sukuna gets launched, and he continues to put up a pretty good fight, kicking Rika right in the face and launching a grid dismantle at Yuji and Yuta, before he starts to ponder how these students got so strong, and he asks Yuta and Yuji, what have you been up to the past month? And Yuji just tries to yap his way out of this and say hard work and determination, but Yuta spills the beans and says we cheated. And what does Yuta mean when he says they cheated? Well, I made a joke video about this months ago talking about them using the prison realm as a hyperbolic time chamber, because time does not pass in there, and they are able to have somebody from the outside pretty much open it on command. We saw the back of the prison realm get detonated, but we don't know if the front is destroyed. I mean, I kind of assumed it was destroyed, but if it's not and they did use this as a hyperbolic time chamber, that's one explanation. Another explanation is that they used a similar method to what Maki used to get her awakening in Sakurajima, or Gojo just took his spatial manipulation to the next level and unlocked limited time travel. Either way, we get more dialogue from Yuta after this, and he says that if this was prior to Gojo's fight with Sukuna, they would have died instantly. They would have had no time to use their RCT, and this really puts into perspective just how hard Gojo fought to get them here. I like this explanation a lot more because when it was just Mahoraga, it really seemed like Gojo just died for nothing. How much these explanations were pre-planned versus a reaction to the negative comments that people were making, I don't think anybody will ever know for sure. But given that this is a weekly written series, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the explanations were not initially planned. Regardless, after this, we see Yuta utilize Charles' technique of clairvoyance against Sukuna. And apparently Sukuna's battle IQ is so high, he is able to figure out that this is clairvoyance immediately. But Yuta continues the warpath and picks up yet another katana, and he then proceeds to use sky manipulation before grabbing his final katana, saying this is it, and using Sukuna's own cleave against him. And we see the cuts start to form across Sukuna as he realizes with a bit of shock what is going on. And given the nature of cleave, this should be an instant kill, but will it be? No. I gotta say, this is like the third time we've had an end of chapter cliffhanger where it's like, oh, is Sukuna dead? And at this point, it's kind of insulting. I don't know if this is actually supposed to fool anybody, but it's really more like we're all waiting to find out how Sukuna slips out of this one. Sukuna dying before the fire arrow, or whatever the open box is, if it's his true CT or something else entirely, is actually explained. I just see that as so unlikely, it's a little hard to take it seriously. I won't say it's impossible because I don't write Jujutsu Kaisen, but it's the same problem I had in the Gojo fight, where it feels like you're waiting to get to the point where a character is allowed to die. And Yuta is the leader of a squad, and Hakari is busy with the Ice Wizard, and Maki is nowhere to be seen. Which, to be fair, I really don't blame her, because if you don't have reverse curse technique, I wouldn't want to get hit by the dismantle tidal wave either. As for how Yuta acquired cleave in the first place, there are a couple options. Number one is they still have the extra Sukuna finger, or at the very least, Gojo is assumed to have the last finger by Sukuna, and even if he doesn't, Yuji himself is like a cursed object. So just rip a chunk off of Yuji and toss it to Rika, or just have Rika eat the last finger. Whatever works, they got that technique, they have cleave, and that in itself, it is a boon for the team. Cleave is an incredibly simple but also brutally effective ability that is so effective it does not work the same in Malevolent Shrine, because if it did, it would just be too overpowered. But on the note of Sukuna's domain, it has been mentioned multiple times to be nearly recovered, so we're probably going to see that pretty soon. Once the heavy hitters show up, I'm guessing we're going to enter the mini arc Escape from Malevolent Shrine, and that seems like a pretty interesting way to change up the pace a bit. I've mentioned a couple times that Gojo noticed with the 6 eyes that the center of Malevolent Shrine, the shrine itself, that is the foundation, and Yuji makes a note of this as well. So if he does open up Malevolent Shrine again, I'm guessing that Yuji is going to punch the shrine apart. And even though Sukuna still has half his cursed energy left, I don't think we're going to see him burn out his rain again to do more, because he's just beginning to recover. Overall, I would go as far to say that this is one of the best chapters we've had in months, and one of the best chapters we have had since the latter half of Gojo vs Sukuna. And while this chapter is mostly action and mostly power scaling, that's kind of what shonen is all about. And not every chapter can be some massive self-reflection moment for a character where they question their whole motivation. I think the action here is great. It is really cool to see Yuta and Yuji fighting together for the first time in the series, though I kind of fear it's going to be the last time because Yuta has some death lags. Because Gege Akatame really likes to gas up a character and make them look really impressive before they murder them, and nobody ever gets a subtle death in Jujutsu Kaisen. It's always an explosion. Some body part goes flying off, they get like cut into tomato pieces, and by that point they've probably already lost a limb. A worst case scenario, you're a Lunchable. Best case scenario, you wake up in heaven. But those are my opinions on this chapter and how people die in Jujutsu Kaisen. I'm probably going to make a video talking about Yuta's domain a bit more because quite frankly, I just think it's cool. Maybe it's just because I like katanas, and if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching.